I had a choice. They read me my Miranda rights. I said, this is one final time to blow the whistle. I named president, the vice president, senior people, including Hayden, about what had gone down over the last 6+ years. I knew anything I said would be used against me. It was. I knew that I was now the primary target, and probably had been for a while.
What was it like when you realized, or was there like a specific point when you realized that the NSA had turned all of the surveillance onto you?
This is my technical background. I knew that they would start monitoring me electronically because they could.
Via
their own means. I could see, I set up logs. I could see where they're attempting to break into my system. I had a network at home. Remember, I've been in long into this.
Okay.
I was, back in the early days, pre-internet,
yes.
BBSs.
So
Waste, Gopher. I was, before internet was internet in terms of public eye, back in the 80s.
You had stuff in place monitoring
yes.
this. You were prepared for
weird things like the Verizon DSL box would get reset. I'd call them up and they say, you have to pass. It's like, wait a minute. Yeah, they were remotely resetting it, but I had multiple firewalls, both hardware and software.
Wow.
I don't ever believe, although it's possible, I never saw that they actually got into my computers.
Oh, really?
No, that's right. I don't have any, in some ways I take some pride in that with I knew what they had, what their capabilities were. But the problem was there's what's called zero-day exploits. There was always possible, right? So I had to assume I was compromised anyways. But see, people say, well, gee, if you know that, why didn't you get rid of everything? I had nothing to hide to use that, which I don't like that phrase because that comes from Joseph Goebbels, right? If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to worry about. So who cares what we know about you? Yep. Wait a minute.
Yep.
That's not the point. I used to do exercises on privacy and people get to point, oh yeah, no, that's me. Why is it you? No, because I don't want them to know it. Why? Because that's me. Oh, so there is some ownership here in terms of your own privacy. Right? Mm-hmm. Privacy is essential to even living.
Yes, 100%.
As much as people want to dump stuff out there, right? It's amazing what people put out there, right? But there is something about who we are, the essence, but that's a different conversation.
Yes.
So I'm getting, then they start physically surveilling me. It was covert. This is where John Kiriakou knows that really, really well, better than I do. But it was clear that and then it started to be overt. They wanted to make clear that we're on to you. Like they were now
they want you to know that they're following you.
Wanted me to know. I was getting stopped quite frequently. They would have random searches. My searches weren't random at all. Coming to the gate, right? They had already alert based on the tags, the car description.
It's intimidation.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Huge.
Yeah.
So that went on until my colleagues, NSA, all retired, and then Diane Rourke were raided all on the same day in July of 2007. I knew that I was now the primary target and probably had been for a while. I was still at NSA. They probably had suspicion that I was in contact with a reporter. Although later they actually thought I was really in contact. They actually thought that was a cover, a cutout. There was like a cover, and that I was at like a convenient hangout, as they call it, right? Just a
limited hangout.
A limited hangout with her, but I had really been in contact for a longer period of time with the New York Times.
Really?
They later made up a whole chronology but it turned out I wasn't. Right? I never had any contact with the New York Times.
That's crazy.
So I knew in July that I was now the target.
Yeah.
And it was clear based on the last couple of meetings with the reporter, Siobhan Gorman, who at the time was working for the Baltimore Sun, later went to the Wall Street Journal. Now she's more in private. In consulting practice, has been for quite a while. I knew that there were agents in the room. Including, by the way, I found out later that they were actually using a significant number of agents from the Mole Hunter unit at FBI. Those are the ones that are trained to go after spies.
Like legitimate spies, foreign spies.
But that's how I was being treated worse than a spy. That's clear. I was now the threat. I was the leaker. I found out later that Cheney had issued a fine and fry the leaker. He just said, fine and fry them. I don't care. Just make sure it's someone, apparently, it has to be senior enough. But burn them. Make an object lesson of them. That's how I interpreted it.
Right.
So late November, I'm getting ready to go to work. I had 2 vehicles at the time. I had my hybrid, which is a Prius, and then I had a Toyota RAV4 EV. It was all electric. Limited. It was a limited run. I'm getting ready in the other bedroom, right, to get in my car, go down to the metro, and go down. And then there was a bus that would shuttle me over from the Coast Guard headquarters take me to one of the metro stations, drop me off by bus, a government bus in front of, and then I walked to my office where I was teaching, had been for a couple of years. It was actually during that time is when I met. We'll probably want to take a break here shortly, but that's when I met Elon Musk.
Oh,
during the time I was at the National Defense University, where I was teaching in the Industrial College of the Armed Forces.
okay.
And I was a co-lead on their space industries team. That's how I ended up going to SpaceX with some students.
Okay.
Yeah, a bunch of different. We went to Cape Kennedy. We went out to We went out to Cheyenne Mountain. I mean, went inside the Cheyenne Mountain. Right. We went to a number of different sites. Right. So I'm getting ready for work. I look out the window and I see a bunch of agents streaming across the front yard and a bunch of cars pulling up as they're piling out.
Oh no.
And that's where, the moment is another one of those moments because, this is years later, right? But that article had come out, right, almost 2 years ago, right? This is we're talking. And so remember, they've had this multi-million-dollar national leak investigation going on as to who were the sources for the New York Times in particular. I got caught up in that for all the reasons I gave earlier because so few people knew about the program. Even though they argued later, just some disagreement between 2 programs, SynThread, Trailblazer, while that was like the limited cutout as to why they came after me, when in fact it wasn't that at all. It was the fact that Stellar Wind had been revealed, even though I had not provided any classified information about the program to anybody outside of channels.
Right.
Not even the reporter.
Right.
So you can imagine knocking on the door. They said, they told me later, if you hadn't opened it, they knocked twice. They had a battering ram with them. No kidding that they would have used the battering ram to punch through the door. And then you can file a claim later for damages.
Your son answered
the door because it's upstairs. I said, Zachary, go answer the door. He's got the presence of mind. He just says,
and you didn't say.
Oh, I knew.
You didn't tell him.
I hadn't told anybody. Man, I kept this a secret from my own family.
No, you didn't tell the FBI's at the door.
No, of course not.
How old was he?
He was okay. 95. He would have been 12. Middle school. So normally my spouse would take him to the middle school, right, in the local town, and then I would pick him up, right, after school. So, yeah, bunch of agents come in. They start sweeping the house. I had a choice. They read me my Miranda rights. I didn't have to cooperate. Obviously, I could have said, you're going to have to deal with my attorney. I didn't have an attorney at that time, right? At that moment, I didn't have an attorney. So I said, this is one final time to blow the whistle. I named president, the vice president, senior people, including Hayden, about what had gone down over the last 6+ years. No, we're not here for that. We understand you violated, certain laws, and so we're here to collect evidence. And we can interview you, or you don't have to. I didn't have to be interviewed. Obviously, I had Miranda rights. I could have remained silent. I said, no, it was an interview, it was interrogation. That was one of 3, by the way. They took notes. I knew anything I said would be
right, of course,
used against me. It was.